Welcome to Seville 92, the Universal Exposition, which starts on the 20th of April until the 12th of October, and it's been classified as the event of the century. There are over 100 countries participating and lots of firms as well. So there are many pavilions, as well as the telecabina and the observation tower, the monorail, and lots of other features. I'm sure that it will attract many visitors. Something like between 14 and 16 million visitors are expected, over half of whom will be from Spain and the rest from overseas. And we're expecting beautiful weather, beautiful blue sky, and not much rain during the 6 months, so plenty of opportunities to see the different events.
This bronze-clad building, the largest in the exposition, named the Plaza of America, gathers the pavilions of several Latin American countries. It has an auditorium for staging shows, shared areas, and typical restaurants in the upper levels. Behind this, off-site, you can see the harp-shaped Alamillo Bridge.
Well, we're standing on the Expo site. It's a beautiful sunny day, very warm, blue sky, and we're at the northernmost part of the Expo site looking at what's called the Jumbotron, which is produced by Sony. It's the largest television screen in the world, and this feature is going to remain after the Expo has gone, because this area is going to be developed into a technological research center. This is one of the many maps on the site that help people to find their way around. These are the international pavilions. Then there's the lake here with the Spanish autonomous region pavilions around it. You notice that there are various pictures here, and they're coded here to help people find their way around. For example, this is the theatre, this is the auditorium, this is the pavilion of the future. And these are placed at strategic points around the site so that people know exactly where they are and where they can find the pavilions that they want to go to. Well, this corner is the area that represents Southeast Asia. It's a sort of a crescent-shaped sweep of buildings. We have Indonesia here, then Malaysia, next to that Singapore, and finally here is Thailand. They're all representative buildings of those particular countries, and above the one in Thailand is a small replica of the Royal Palace of Bangkok. This is the pavilion of the United States of America. It's the biggest pavilion in terms of the area it covers. It's quite a controversial pavilion, and it's had a bad press in that the budget for it had to be cut because the Congress said that they couldn't afford to release the original sum of money because of the expense of the Gulf War. And so there's been a lot of disappointment about the actual finished product, and the press have given it a very bad hearing. They've said, you know, the most powerful nation in the world produces a third-rate pavilion. This open area here is a fun area for theatre, for drama, for entertainment. And then there are two domes which house various features, and a huge square block at the end which has a restaurant and the administration quarters. This is the British Pavilion, and the two big features on it are this yacht at the end. Another one of these is actually travelling around the world at the moment, and it's hoped that it will make its complete circle of the world by the end of Expo. The feature here is the waterfront, which is powered by photoelectric cells which are on the roof and converting the energy of the sun into electric power, and it's quite a special feature. Well, as you can see, even the manhole covers on site have got the mark of Expo 92 on them. This pyramid-shaped structure is the pavilion of the common market. As you can see, there's the common market flag at the bottom, and then the member states have their own flags going up. It's a pavilion which is subterranean, so most of it is actually underneath this concrete structure. Well, here behind me we've got an artificially created lake, and it's crescent shaped, and around the circle are the pavilions of the different autonomous regions of Spain. And the one straight ahead with the funnel shape is the pavilion of Andalusia, and then here on my right we've got the pavilion of Spain. And once, I can't remember which side it is, it might be over there. When you look across the lake, you see the pavilion of Las Americas, and it looks really attractive, this copper-shaped building on the edge of the lake. Well, way down here, out of view actually, is the Chapina Bridge, which was very cleverly constructed on dry land, and then the river was flooded underneath it, and then the earth was dredged out. You can see many of these connecting bridges that connect the entrance part of the Expo with the main island of Cartuja. The pavilion over on my right is the pavilion of the future, and in front of it is an observation tower called the Banesto. You can see at this point that the monorail crosses over the lake, and you get quite a spectacular view of the lake from the monorail. We're walking down one of the avenues on the Expo site. This one is covered, it's got a canopy, but the canopy is of plants which shields visitors from the sun. It's also got a very clever system called a microclimate. There are pipes here which spray fine water into the plants to actually keep them succulent and well watered. And as that water vaporizes, it creates a cooler atmosphere in this region. So the temperature in here is about 10 degrees lower than it will be outside. Okay. This is the pavilion of Hungary. It's in the shape of a church, and actually there are icons being featured inside. Notice the architecture, especially of the roof. It's covered in grey tiles, and it's got turrets with various symbols on the top. This is one of the pavilions that could win an award, because it's quite attractive. Well, here we have the microclimate feature actually in operation. You can see the vapor coming out, and it's keeping those plants moist, and at the same time in the lower area, if you sit on one of the benches, you feel the temperature is noticeably cooler than outside. One of the many children's rides that are featured on the site, models of Curro, who is the emblem, the symbol of the Expo. It's a strange looking creature, a mixture of an animal and a bird, with this rainbow sprouting out from the top of his head and a multicolored nose. In this plaza, in this particular region, the trees have been equipped with this microclimate spray of vapor, and you can see them in full action now. But it's quite amusing because they look as if they're actually on fire. This is the pavilion of Sri Lanka. And as you can see behind me, there's a huge statue of the Buddha, and it's going to be a center of outreach for Buddhism. Well, this is the Pavilion of Promise, still very much under construction, a lot more work to do. And this pavilion is going to be presenting the Christian gospel in quite a spectacular way, using modern technology, to about 1.5 million visitors. Well, good day mate, and welcome to Neighbours. I used to be quite a fan when I was in England, but I don't watch it now, even though it is dubbed in Spanish and shown here. This is one of the many refreshment areas on the site. This is a reproduction of an Australian pub and restaurant, and it's quite effective with its characters and its signs, quite characteristic. There are several means of transport of actually getting into the Expo site. Obviously by road, by rail, by boat, by hydrofoil, by helicopter, and by this cable car which you can see in front of us. This particular area is dedicated to space research, so we have a rocket, we have the space shuttle, and we have the satellite dish. And a little further down the river on the left-hand side is the huge auditorium, an open-air concert building which has the largest stage in the world. Well, this sandy-coloured building is the Pavilion of Saudi Arabia. It's covered with plaster and straw. It looks as if it's not finished, but this is actually part of the design. Around the other side are wooden features with typical Islamic patterns on them. And inside here we have a tent which represents the lifestyle of the Saudis in the desert. This is going to be the pavilion which forms the centre of outreach for Islam. This is another piece of modern technology in that it's a machine that has a map of the whole area of the Expo, and you can actually select with a pointer a particular pavilion or a particular area of the Expo and zoom in on it and get a detailed plan and get information about that particular feature that you focused on. Well, this rather unusual structure is the Pavilion of India. It's got a dome-shaped building constructed of wood in the foreground, and behind it is a peacock's tail made up of thousands of pieces of mosaic. This huge globe is part of an experimental research program of the climate. It actually measures certain things, and it actually produces the vapors that we saw under the microclimate to make the whole area underneath a lot cooler than the rest of the Expo site.
Well, Chris, thank you for showing us around the Expo site. You obviously know Seville quite well. Would you like to tell us how long you've been here and why you came to Spain?
I've been here just over 2 years, and I came out originally with SAMS, the South American Missionary Society, because they sent all of their recruits out here for language study and for orientation before they went off to South America. But when I actually arrived, I was asked if I would be willing to stay on so that I could get involved in one of the local Spanish churches and also become involved in the Expo.
Thank you, Chris. Now, would you like to perhaps tell us what you are doing now, your main work in Seville at present?
Well, I'm based in a Spanish church, the Episcopal Church. It's called San Basilio, which is on the other side of the city, and I'm actually doing some work there with a Sunday school, and occasionally I preach. But my main work is to be one of the chaplains of the Expo site, so I'm also here sometime in the week. I visit the pavilions to support the Christian workers who are here. I'm also going to be involved in the Pavilion of Promise when that starts its outreach program next week. And I'm also responsible for English services off-site.
Thank you very much.
Looking now at the pavilion represented by the South Sea Islands group of islands. As you can see, it's a traditional construction of dried leaves and Very unusual shape, but very interesting, especially with this surrounding flora. I spoke to some of the workers here about the fire risk, but they just smiled and said, well, we've got plenty of fire extinguishers. I used to visit the South Sea Islands Pavilion because there were a number of Christians who worked on that, and I can remember going by several times and some of them on the thatched roof waving to me. And it was quite sad when, well, one day I came onto the site and I saw lots of smoke. There was a big fire. Somebody told me that it was the African Pavilion, but when I went to investigate I saw that that was intact. And as I went around the corner I was absolutely shocked by what met me, because there was just some black charred rubble left of this South Sea Islands Pavilion, because that had actually caught fire and had burnt down quite quickly. And after having spoken to some of the people who were involved in that, they said that they wouldn't be able to reconstruct it, but the show would still go on. They managed to save some of their artifacts and they would put them on display, and they would continue doing their South Sea Island dances in front of the pavilion. Well, this is the large Episcopalian church called San Basilio, or St. Basil's, which is situated in a region of Seville called the Alameda, the red light district. I've been here for 2 years, involved in some of the Spanish work, particularly work with children and doing some preaching, although now I'm based on the Expo site. As you can see, it's quite a large building and it's relatively new. It was built by funds from German Christians. Well, we're standing in one of the streets in Seville, not far from the Plaza de Alameda. We're making our way towards the center to see one of the cofradías, one of the paseos of the Semana Santa processions. As you can see, there are lots of people in these streets. It's pretty crowded as they make their way to the procession. We've had to park our car further down the street because it's quite difficult to get close on foot, and we're hoping to get nearer so that we can hear and see what's happening in one of the processions. We're right in the center now, in the Plaza del Duque, looking at one of the main processions that's coming around the corner. This is part of the Holy Week celebrations every year, starting on Palm Sunday and going right through to Resurrection Sunday, there are 58 processions each day and some during the night in Sevilla. And we're beginning to get something of the atmosphere now. Crowds of people, great expectation as they carry the paseo around the corner, the smell of incense, and people waiting as the band comes to prepare for the arrival of either a statue of Jesus or a statue of the Virgin Mary. This is one of 10 processions that are taking place in Seville today, and they leave different chapels, different cathedrals at different times, so they're staggered, but they all have to pass the same route. They have to go along Calle Sierpes to the cathedral, and then they return via a different route. ¿Por qué estás aquí en la plaza del Duque?
She said that she came regularly to this annual event because it was part of the tradition of the city.
Dime algo sobre
He said it's a tradition of many years, it's in our blood, he said. It's a splendid day. Everyone is having a great time together.
We're looking up now on one of the balconies in the center, and as you can see there's a banner up there which says Canal Sur. This is one of the local television companies. This Semana Santa is very popular, very famous throughout the whole of Andalusia, and even nationally it's broadcast on radio and TV throughout the whole of the country. This is one of the other processions. This is the procession called La Estrella, the star. And as you can see, we've got various people here dressed in a particular way. These belong to the Hermandades, brotherhoods, and they're dressed like this to conceal their identity because they believe that they're doing penance. There are several of these Hermandades in the city that have their own cofradías, and they join the processions each year, and as their contribution they walk several miles along the route. I'm going to ask this lady what she's doing here. Hola, buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
¿Cómo se llama?
I'm from Sevilla, she said. In fact, I'm from Triana. I'm proud of it. When I asked her what she was doing here, she said this is the best thing that could happen in the world.
We're now standing quite close to the Ayuntamiento, which is the government building. All of the cofradías have to pass by here officially, and they're saluted by the Lord Mayor.
¿Por qué ustedes van a la calle para ver, bueno, los pasos?
He said that he was a Christian and it was part of his devotion to come along, but also that he'd got a child who was involved in the procession and he wanted to come to support him.
Well, we've battled our way through the crowds. We're now in the cathedral area where all the cofradías have to come during Semana Santa, the Holy Week processions. And as you can see behind us, there's a cofradía about to enter the cathedral. ¿Dónde estamos?
En la catedral, estamos aquí al lado de la catedral.
¿Y por qué estás aquí?
And she said that she came regularly. She'd always been brought up to come along to the processions, and that the particular procession that we were looking at was the one called Standing.
Well, I'm standing here and it's about 9:05 Sunday evening, and I'm looking at the program. We see that the earliest procession started at 1:30 at lunchtime, and that's still carrying on. The last one will finish at 2:30 tomorrow morning. We've gone through about half of the processions, and the one that's approaching now is the procession of La Paz, which means the peace. Well, we're in the centre of Sevilla, and it's 11:15 at night, and there are still lots of crowds milling around. Strong police presence as well, though no trouble. Lots of rubbish around the street, and the processions are still carrying on.
Thank you, Chris, for guiding us in a tour of that procession. And now I would like to explain a bit to you about what it is all about. My name is Rogelio Prieto, and I'm the pastor of what is in fact the oldest evangelical church in Seville. When we came here 2 years ago, we had a real shock. We used to live before in the north of Spain, in the Basque country, and processions at Easter during Holy Week there had ceased for several years, in fact, due to the fact that there were not enough people volunteering to carry the images around. Now, when we came here, we found that already in October and November, there was the typical music of processions sounding all over the place, and we found that it was the groups that were to play at Easter were already practicing at that time. That gave us some idea of how deep these celebrations go in Seville. I soon found out that the motto of the city is the unconquered and Marian city of Seville. And to understand the processions here, you have to understand that Seville is a Marian city, much more than a Christian city. One of the two main images of Mary is very near our church. At the entrance there is a stone tablet that says that in such and such a date in 1940, she who is the daughter of the Eternal Father, the mother of the Divine Son, and the Immaculate Spouse of the Holy Spirit, the love of loves of Seville, and the only hope for mortal men, gained control, or was given that arch at the entrance of the church in that date. That's the way processions work here. The typical pattern is many men dressed in this peculiar way, hiding their faces, walking for up to 13, 14 hours, some of them barefoot, to make penance for their sins. The basic fact behind that is that this Southern Catholicism reflects still some of the Muslim culture that was the dominant culture here for 700 years, over 700 years. God is far away. The whole perspective of people is fatalistic. They're afraid of God. You have to pay for your sins. So one way of doing it, or of getting some favor from God, is to say to him, if you do this for me, I will follow one of these images during the processions. in Easter week. There are some 39 processions going all around the city in 1 week. They go from Palm Sunday till Saturday evening or Saturday night. All of them follow the same pattern. There is an image of Jesus with penitents in front and behind. And that image of Jesus is always either crucified or being flogged or there with Pilate. This tends to be a very sad image of Jesus almost conquered by death. And then at the end of the procession it closes with a beautiful image of Mary full of glory and splendor, with candles all around, silver, gold, the most beautiful garments one can imagine. And that is the center of interest of the whole procession. To give you some idea, in the procession that came through our streets a few days ago, that is one of the main ones, the procession of Our Lady Macarena, that is kept very near here, there were 2,400 men. It's only men, never women. 400 of those men were accompanying the image of Jesus, 2,000 accompanying the image of Mary. It's also very funny when you hear people in this area who feel that this image of Mary, their Mary, is so important to them. When you hear them talking about the other image of Mary in the same city, at the other side of town, the other side of the river, the title of both images is basically the same. It's Our Lady of Hope. But this one is Our Lady of Hope Macarena, the area where it is. And the other one is Our Lady of Hope Trianera, the area where it is kept. Now, I was recently having a haircut just round the corner. And this man with whom I've become quite friendly was talking to somebody else. He's very much of a follower of the Macarena. And he was talking to one of his friends, very, very excited, both of them, and very angry. The other one said, well, why is it that the musical band of the other one, they wouldn't even mention the other image? There's such rivalry. Why is it that the musical band of the other one was at the entrance of our door as we came out this last Sunday? My barber, who was very angry about it too, he said, well, you see, we've had some discussions with them, some arguments, and that was their revenge. They sent their people to play at our door to provoke us. It's like football. They have to make sure there's no danger of the two processions crossing each other, because if they did, people here say there might even be blood. Difficult to understand, I know, but it is not so difficult when you realize that for them, Mary is not the biblical Mary, is this or that image of Mary. That is the Mary that is in fact deep down in their hearts, in their emotions, their God, the one they turn to when they're in trouble. And it is a specific image of Mary that they come to. They wouldn't go to any other one. In this week, Easter week, we've had processions coming all over the place all the time. But the sad thing is that on Sunday there's nothing. It's death and death and death of Jesus all over the week. Glory and glory and glory of Mary, and on Sunday, on Easter Sunday, bullfights. That's when the bullfights season starts. Even coming from northern Spain, we found it shocking. But it is when you are able to get into the feelings of these people who follow the processions, when you get really shocked. I must say that every time that this procession of Our Lady Macarena comes through here, my stomach turns. I have to control myself not to cry. Last year I went to one of the bedrooms crying. I couldn't control myself because I've been one of them. I know how they feel. I know how excited they get. You can hear the people in front of the image of Mary. They're all waiting for Jesus to pass by because they're waiting for Mary. And you can hear people coming and saying, she's coming, she's coming. And then when the image appears, you can find all these people walking backwards and shouting at the image, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. The rivalry between the different fraternities that look after the images is also shown in the amount of care they put into dressing the images as beautifully as possible. There's a competition among them to make sure that the clothes are the most beautiful, the silver, the gold, candelabra, the candles are the best possible thing they can offer. They've been doing this for so many years, and that is their religion. Most of those people won't go to church at all during the year. They couldn't care less. You would even find people that if they heard somebody blaspheming God, wouldn't be moved, they would do it themselves. But if somebody were to say anything against Mary, they would jump out of their skins, and they would make you jump out of your skin if you were to do it. That's the kind of mentality. I've been one of them. I know the feelings, and it is that makes me so terribly sad, because they've put all their trust on what in fact is just a piece of wood.
Well, we've come to join one of the big processions, the Esperanza de Triana. There are two major processions this evening, or I should say the early hours of this morning. It's now 1 o'clock on Good Friday morning, and we're at the back street, the back entrance to the church, where all the Nazarenes are lining up to go in to join the procession. The atmosphere is quite electric. Lots of people coming into the bars and finding their place on the other side of the street so that they can get a good view of the procession as it leaves the church. We see the procession has actually just started. The band is playing and leading ahead, and the people are waiting in expectation for the first paso, the horse, to leave the chapel. Well, we can see the Nazarenes walking along now, and they're carrying a cross with their particular emblem featured on that. There'll be quite a long row of these. They tend to have two colors, purple and green. It'll probably take quite a while to clear such a large number of Nazarenes before the first paso comes out of the chapel. It's really noticeable that there's a very small police presence this year. It's quite unusual. Normally police here to control the crowds so that they don't get out of hand, and to allow a passage for the procession to move through the center. At this time of the year, the candle makers have a field day in producing candles for these processions, because most of the Nazarenes carry a candle during the night processions, and they're quite large. They have to be careful how they carry them so that they don't obviously set fire to themselves or anybody in the crowd, and also so that they don't spill wax over people. Yeah. And now we see the first paso appearing out of the door. You see the horse's head. This is a procession of a Roman soldier riding on a horse and preceding Jesus carrying his cross. And the crowds are going absolutely crazy now. They're clapping and applauding, and soon I believe they'll be chanting. As you can see, it's quite a large procession. it's quite a skill to maneuver it out of the door and turn it around. The crowds are now really applauding the maneuver because the horse is now facing the rest of the procession and we're proceeding forward. With different maneuvers and different renderings by the band, the crowd react in various ways, and this is deliberate by those who are playing in the bands and by those who are carrying the paso to try to stir up the crowds and provoke some sort of a response. It's a very strong smell of incense now as the bearers precede the paso and swing the incense. It's very like a sweet, sickly smell in the crowd now. These pasos are very heavy to carry, and even though there may be between 30 and 40 people underneath this, every now and then they have to pause for a rest, and also they deliberately stop so that the crowds near to the paso can get a good view of the figures and the candles. As you can see, it proceeds fairly slowly. That's partly because of the size of the paso, but also because of the crowds that are around it. It's quite difficult to maneuver amongst the people. And the Nazarenes who precede the paso sometimes actually block the way because they have to stop depending upon what's happening in front of them. Thing as it's getting nearer now, you can see it's quite enormous. It's fairly ornate with its gold and its many candles. Now we have the solo trumpeter. The carriers are swaying backwards and forwards to create a certain atmosphere. Police have now moved in to try and push some of the crowds back so that the paso can get through. And now it's moving at top speed to clear this part of the street.
momentito más. Vamos a aguantar un poquito esta segunda larga. Vale, mi arma. Vamos a hacerlo por el lado. Vámonos, vámonos. Bueno, va. Pues venga de frente. Vámonos, vámonos un poquito. Vamos, mi gente buena. Vamos a vaciar,
Well, it's now cleared the place where I'm standing. Moved forward quite a distance now, and we have to wait for the next paso to come out. But before that, there's the band, and there'll be quite a number of Nazarenes as well. The crowds are getting quite excited now. They've obviously heard something or smelled something or seen something that indicates that the Virgin is now ready to leave the chapel. People have gone inside either to watch the television or make drinks, and they've rushed back out onto their balconies, and there's a real feeling of tension and expectation, and you'll hear people chanting soon. And they'll be chanting guapa, 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 which means beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And it's a form of adoration and greeting to the Virgin as she leaves the church. The candle bearers have just left the chapel and are proceeding the second part of the procession. I think you can hear the crowds now shouting guapa. There's often a tension between those who are shouting out, those who are chanting, and other people who don't want to be disturbed, and therefore they make a hissing sound to try to calm the crowds down. Well, the crowd's getting really excited now because they've seen the candles and they can see the Virgin about to leave the chapel, and the cameras flashing, the people are clapping and whistling and shouting out and calling out guapa, guapa, beautiful, beautiful. The band is playing the familiar music that accompanies the Virgin. It's coronation type music, as opposed to the somber piece that was played when the first paso of Jesus left the chapel. There's a kind of a coordinated shuffling movement so that the paso can be maneuvered round to the right and can face the rest of the procession. Two of the candles have gone out, so they're having to light them. There's a bit of a breeze coming up now, and it is starting to feel a little bit chilly, but it's not surprising because it's now 3:20. Yes, they come. This is a well-known tradition. They're coming from the balconies and from the azotea, from the roof, absolutely showering the Virgin now. Millions and millions of coloured pieces of paper represent petals that are raining down on her. I've never quite seen as many as this before. And the crowds love this tradition. I don't know what the road sweepers think tomorrow when they have to clear up all the mess. And soon she'll be just disappearing out of sight around this corner, ready to go over the Puente de Triana, the Triana Bridge, and towards the centre to follow the official route, and we'll return back to the chapel later on today at 1 o'clock, so it's quite a long trek.
Now the economy of the whole city would be crushed if suddenly processions were to cease, because there's so much that is spent on it, economically, emotionally, socially, that the whole structure of society would change. But even financially, the city would be in trouble, because there's so much tourism and there's so much money in clothes and in all the other beautiful things that accompany the processions. To give you an idea of what it means, the whole thing, I think I'd better tell a story, a true story. My mother was always a very devout Roman Catholic, as I was. The first thing that came into our home when we moved, I was 3.5, and I still remember it, was an image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. That image had to get into the house before we got in. And after that, many other images came crowding the house. When I came to the Lord and I understood finally the gospel, and I finally understood that I didn't have to earn my salvation, and I couldn't is something I always knew, but that's why I was so desperate. And after a long story, I came to the scriptures and I found what the grace of God really meant. That it didn't mean some help for my merits to earn salvation. It meant that the Lord Jesus had done it all for me. It was a real surprise, a joyful surprise. So I tried to share that with my mother. She was deeply shocked. In Spain, even today, and even though most people are irreligious, if you say you've got something to do with evangelicalism or Protestantism, first of all, people don't know what you're talking about. But then they take it for granted you're in a sect. Saying you're a Protestant here gives people the same impression as saying I'm an occultist. It would give to you. So I came to my mother and she was shocked. We started arguing until one day I said, well look, let's just read the New Testament together from now on. Let's just pray for the family and not argue. And after 7 years doing that, I had to leave home for circumstances. I had to go and live somewhere else. And a few months later, she phoned me one day crying and very, very moved. And she told me the story. My brother was very ill. She was very worried. She went into her bedroom. She knelt down, put her arms in a cross shape, as she used to do, to make penance and then win God's favor more easily. And she started praying. And as she was praying, just repeating the Creed or the Lord's Prayer or the Hail Mary as many times as possible. While she was doing that, she suddenly realized something. The Lord really opened her eyes. And suddenly she thought, well, why am I praying to a Christ made of wood in my village, 500 kilometers from here? If you, Lord, are alive, if you're here, you are true, you are here, you are with me, you are alive, what am I doing? She just fell on her knees again, started crying and gave her heart to the Lord. Just after that, she went to my brother and prayed for him, and he was all right. But that's the kind of dramatic change that it meant for her and for me, and it would mean for many other people, to realize, first of all, that God is not far away. They feel they have to go through Mary, because in the Spanish culture, where men are very detached from their families very often, They feel the only way you can get something out of a father is going through the mother, touching the heart of the father through the mother. They also feel that even Christ is so remote, but Mary is near, and Mary understands, so they'd better go to Mary and through Mary get things from Jesus. But if they could understand the love of Christ, if they could understand that the tenderness of Christ has no rival, if they could understand what the cross means, what the love of God really means, then they would give up all these other useless helps, as one day I did, without arguments, but just realizing that I didn't need any more. No more intermediaries, no more penances, no more sacrifices, no more running around behind images. Please pray for Seville and pray for Spain. People are leaving the Roman Catholic Church in their thousands. In the last 20 years, more than 50% of those who used to claim to be practicing Roman Catholics don't claim that any longer. But at the same time, there's a deep suspicion of anything that is not Roman Catholic. And in the midst of that suspicion, we have to strive to bring to them the good news of the love of Christ.
Muy bien. Al contar tres. 1, 2 y 3. Hay un canto en mi corazón. Jesús murió por mí. Resucitó allí. Y a él vine en mi corazón. Y sé que pronto volverá. Muy bien. Muy bien. Ahora sí.
¿Es qué? Muy bien, de acuerdo. Es como las plantas también. Mira, tengo varios dibujos aquí. El primer dibujo es de una semilla. Se la plantó en el primer lugar, murió, pero después un brote lo forma, como eso. Y luego hay una planta maravillosa con una flora muy bonita. Y eso es como la resurrección de Jesucristo. Cristo vivió en la tierra, murió y quedó en la tumba desde hace 3 días y después resucitó con su cuerpo glorificado.